Welcome to our special webinar with PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Lab. I'm very, very excited to host this webinar, special connection with this project. Going back when I just came to the US to do research about how to support teachers. I was a high school teacher teaching media production, very tough neighborhood in Israel. And with all the difficulties between the students, the parents, administration, I felt like there needs to be help and advocacy and research to support teachers. And that's why I came to the US, working with Renee. And our most cited article is the article that we did about the project of Student Reporting Labs, showing that actually with a control group, it's the production and the journalism inquiry, you learn to analyze much deeper and you much more engaged and connected to your community. So Learn to Engage is our article that you can see on our website, the Media Education Lab. And learning about the project and the curriculum and the work is really exciting. And I think with all what we're going through now, the first resource that I saw was what the Students Reporting Lab put, very comprehensive guide and their personal help. And what we want to offer today is kind of like showcase what has been going on with Students Reporting Lab, some teachers that will share, and then have time to talk in small groups, but also have time for you to also ask questions and have a larger discussion. So we have a huge agenda packed for the next hour. And I'm very happy to have with me Leah Clapton, the founder. And Leah, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Yanti. Thanks, Renee. We are really excited to see everyone here. And the idea is I'm going to talk a little bit about the Student Reporting Lab's coronavirus, covering the coronavirus unit that we quickly made. And I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to go to the website and show a few elements of it. And then we're going to hear from Chris Sloan, who is a teacher at Judge Memorial High School in Salt Lake City, who has been with Student Reporting Labs for a while and whose students kind of picked it up and ran as we all started dealing with this school closures and the move to online learning. So just briefly about me, I was at the PBS NewsHour as an intern, actually. And then I went and worked at CNN for a little while. And then when the NewsHour was starting up a website, I came back and helped start up the website, but always had my passion with teachers and kind of knew that there were teachers who were using NewsHour content, public media news content in their classrooms, and how could I make that something that was more like broadly adopted? How could I help those teachers, especially in this new digital world? Where could we create kind of a home for them so that they could, connect around teaching with current events? And out of that process was a lot of conversations with teachers, a lot of conversations with students about what kind of news content did connect with them. And repeatedly, students told me that they understood why they would watch something from the NewsHour, but they didn't feel connected to it. It felt like adult news created for adults, which of course is what it is. So, we tried something new. We just were like, well, what happens if students have the tools to tell the stories from their perspective? And that's where Student Reporting Labs was born in 2009. And it's really just grown since then. So what I thought I'd do is share my screen and kind of show you what the website looks like and talk a little bit about the coronavirus curriculum and some of the opportunities that I really see going forward, because we're hearing from so many high school teachers, and maybe you guys feel this, like teenagers are really disconnected from what's going on in this online, like this forced move to online learning. And they feel as if they're not doing real work. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but they just feel like, it's a little bit of busy work. They're just not connected to academics at this time. So we really see an opportunity for this to be someplace that we expand and open up new opportunities for new teachers to do this kind of project-based journalism, because it really is a real world project-based, challenge. It's kind of a challenge. It's something different for them to really sink their teeth into, to feel like they have, some element of power or control in this very, powerless, uncertain moment. and really to use their creativity in a way to construct something that has a real world impact, which is publication and possible airing in different locations, or just being able to say to the world, hey, look, this is what I care about. This is my story. This is what's happening in my community. So yeah, Renee, I'll share my screen now. So, All right, can you guys see my screen? Yeah. Okay, so this is basically a presentation that I'm not really going to use except to play this video, which just gives you an illustration of after we put out the coronavirus unit, which I'm going to walk you through. We had students producing content, and what we do at the NewsHour is we really celebrate that content, and we show the world this is what teenagers are thinking and feeling. So I'm going to play this video that aired a couple weeks ago on the NewsHour.
By now, schools have been shuttered for weeks across the country. It can be hard on parents to help orchestrate remote learning, and shelter in place presents its own challenges for young people. The NewsHour Student Reporting Labs, that's our journalism training program for high school students, shares some ways that teenagers are coping in the age of quarantine.
Me and many other Americans have been living on lockdown, and during this time, we've been committing ourselves to a pretty strict routine of waking up at a reasonable time, running so I get some vitamin D, eating, doing homework, eating again, doing more homework.
I have learned to engage with my parents a little bit more, playing Scrabble and binge watching television shows.
During this whole time, my teachers have been really flexible, especially with the amount of work they give. Honestly, I miss the classroom atmosphere. It's sometimes hard to stay motivated when you're at home with all of these other distractions around you.
This is kind of my setup. We're required to document it for our video log for today. So pretty much what I'm doing is I have this little desk here set up in front of my TV. It has my homework, my folders, and I kind of do that while watching the TV to kind of keep myself updated with the news for the day.
Honestly, I'm very upset. The coronavirus really affected me because it took away my senior year, and I just been trying to push through.
Due to this outbreak, I won't be able to run track to compete. So I started working on myself. I like to look on the bright side of things by trying to go out for a nice jog once in a while and keep myself fit, not losing my endurance.
I can't see my friends, but that's okay because technology is great and we have Xbox Live and FaceTime.
Although social distancing is hard and it can be very frustrating staying inside every day, all day, these are necessary precautions. So hopefully soon everything will get figured out and everything will go back to normal.
Overall, I'm taking this really seriously and I hope that others are too so we can get back into the swing of things.
That's all it for me. Thank you guys for tuning in and stay safe.
Thanks for hanging out with me today.
Just keep in mind that everyone else is as worried and confused as you are. What I mean is that you're not alone. Stay inside and stay safe.
Thank you all. That was just what we needed to hear tonight. Thank you, Student Reporting Lab.
So that just gives you an idea. You know, they're being creative. They're using the technology that they are super fluent in terms of sharing with their friends and creating videos. But in this case, they're kind of telling the world, and through the NewsHour, they're telling over 2 million people. They're telling, you know, about their lives and what they're experiencing during the lockdown. So let me show you the curriculum that helped them come to those stories. Oh, first I just wanted to show, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. See my many tabs open on my screen. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. One of the things that Renee and Yanti, you know, mentioned is the research that they did on Student Reporting Labs. And, you know, in terms of being able to tell your administrators or to kind of be able to explain to your students why you're doing this, you know, we've seen that the students who create this kind of media have a real increase in their, well, their media literacy skills, their news literacy. I often talk about how, you know, these students know so much more, have such a deeper understanding of news literacy compared to many adults because they've actually done it. They've actually been in an interview. And there's nothing like understanding what goes into a finished piece of news, a finished piece of media, like doing your own interview and realizing that it's really hard to get the right soundbite. And that, you know, the editing process, you're leaving all kinds of things on the, you know, what we used to call the floor of the editing suite because it just didn't work visually or in this visual and video medium. So they have a deep understanding of, interviewing, which you didn't see there, but I'm going to show an example that shows that. They really understand what bias means because they have had to enable to produce their own media and do stories about other people, confront their own biases, and really look at their approach to stories and how that works. And then just really understanding visual medium. And what we love at the NewsHour especially is that they're playful. You saw, at the end of that video, he closes his garage and he's got this TV set and it's sitting on the side of the road. That's actually how his piece opened, with a TV set sitting on the side of the road, and then it comes to life, right? So these students have a lot to teach us as well in terms of what the news is going to look like in the future, and what really, works for Gen Z, their generation, and younger audiences. So I'm going to go out of my presentation again and go to the Student Reporting Labs website. However, when I press escape, it doesn't escape. Renee, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and reshare.
Yep, that's a good workaround. Sometimes Google Slides can be very tricky as it intersects in the Zoom environment. Give me a thumbs up if other people have experienced this problem. It's not uncommon for the problem for you to have to use that strategy of stop sharing and then start sharing.
Yeah. Okay, here we are. So I'm going to go to the Student Reporting Labs website, which is, I suggest that's a great place for everyone to start. It's just studentreportinglabs.org. And let me go back so that you can see the actual website. This is the website, and you'll see that on top we have our educator resources, where we have the curriculum and lesson plans and tutorials that really get into the video production element of what we do. And so we find a lot of teachers who join our network or who are using our curriculum. They might be English teachers or social studies teachers who don't have a background in video. And I just want to say that Student Reporting Labs is here for you. And we have tutorials that you can and worksheets actually, where you can just have your students, I'll just click on it quickly, click on our video tutorials and learn about B-roll, which are the visuals besides your interview that you need to do a story, good lighting, how to frame your shots, like the principles of photography, and then all sorts of resources on teaching audio. Because one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when you go out into the field to do reporting, your audio is almost, it's more important than your video, because you can watch a piece that has kind of a little bit blurry video and you understand what's going on, but if the audio is clear, you're going to follow along. If the audio is blurry, you're going to click out. You're just going to lose the audience. So on the front page, you'll see a couple of resources about coronavirus, but the one I want to show today is this one. And this really came about in, kind of late February, March, as we were watching the coronavirus, march towards the United States. We came together in our lounge, which we have in our office, which I miss dearly because it was our gathering spot. And we just, said, what can we do? What do we need to do? What do our labs need? How can we kind of make this move towards reporting on the coronavirus? And we had already been playing with all kinds of different digital tools for teachers to be able to use Student Reporting Labs. And we just kind of were forced to execute on those ideas. So right here, you'll see making sense of coronavirus through storytelling and media making. And this is our Reporting Labs curriculum unit. There are 3 pathways that you guys can use, and we would love feedback. And this might be, fodder for the conversations that we're going to have. There might be elements of this that you say, oh yeah, I could see that working, or I don't know about that. That's the kind of thing that I'd love to hear in the conversations, and get that feedback. That's really important for us. So within this curriculum, there are 3 paths. One is a quick take, so it's really just tell your story, and a lot of those were what you saw in the video that I played. The second path is a full news package, and hopefully if we have time, I'm going to show something that kind of reflects that approach. And then the third path is misinformation and social commentary. This is really looking at ways to be more playful, to use to use their graphic design, their, like QuickTime. They can do all kinds of experimentation and artsy, self-expression to look at the information that is out there and to respond to it and to create either, memes or explainers. So as you go down this curriculum, which again, we'll share all of these resources after the webinar, here's the step-by-step on how to do your quick take. The first step is really assess your situation. Put pen to paper and think about what's going on in your life and the loved ones around you and your community. And then there's a storyboard to write your personal narrative. And then we have very kind of like step-by-step directions for a written piece, a social media piece produced, sheerly on phones, or a digital piece where you're doing more editing and more production and maybe even some script writing. So that resource is all laid out there. We also have a couple of challenges. And again, as I said, I think that teenagers are really feeling a sense of purposelessness in the work that they are doing, whether or not that's true. But these kinds of challenges, we are offering, we're actually offering awards, gift certificates. We're also offering the opportunity to be published and to be part of something much larger. The PBS American Portrait Project, they're getting, hundreds, thousands of submissions from around the country. And so this is a direct access point into that project so that your video is a part of something much larger about what the country is going through. Brief but Spectacular is another really kind of great challenge where it came out of a NewsHour project where really famous people give their brief but spectacular take on whatever it is, and then that becomes a model for students to talk about what they are passionate about, or to do that as a project with someone else where they get what that person's really passionate about. And one of the great things also, besides the media literacy and the news literacy and the production skills that students get, is we really find and the students talk about this all the time, well, two things. One is storytelling with empathy. One thing that I love about Brief but Spectacular is you are really encouraging the other person. You are right there with the other person and talking about what they're passionate about, and you're being asked to walk in their footsteps and to understand their perspective. And I think that's really important. It's something that we hear from the students a lot, is just how valuable that is to them, to connect with someone, be able to tell their story and do honor by their story and feel empathy for them. The other thing is really getting out of their comfort zone. So when you are working with someone, when you're doing video production, when you need to do your research, and then step out of your comfort zone and talk to an adult or someone else who you've never talked to and do that interview, that's just such a valuable experience for teenagers at this moment. And it's something that I think really resonates when they're doing this kind of project, which, as I said, has kind of real world value and real world experiences. So we keep on going into Path 2 is a full news package. And that's really, the first step is really about telling, Path 1 is really about telling your own story. Path 2 is about telling someone else's story. And so again, this curriculum came out of years of experience and parts of our curriculum that really help students think about their stories. So we have youth media producers who work with our Student Reporting Labs classrooms and after-school programs. And a lot of what those youth media producers do is really coach the students. And so questions that they are constantly asking students as they're thinking about their stories are, what is your big idea? If the audience could only learn one thing from your story, what would it be? They also have to ask, is this a story? Or is it just a big idea that you're not going to be able to do? In which case, do it in a different way. Make media that is just a different format than what Student Reporting Labs does. So really digging into the story format. Does it have a beginning, middle, and end, and an interesting character? Of course, the kind of best news stories have these great characters whose story we get, kind of emotionally connected to. And then also, can you pull this off? Thinking about the logistics, and I'm sure Chris Sloan can talk about this, kind of working with students to make their ideas ambitious but realizable. And then visual. Your Student Reporting Labs, strong point really is our video journalism. And so we have all kinds of tools and strategies for really helping students figure out what visuals they need to do to tell a compelling piece. And then also the editing skills that they can really build up to be able to feel comfortable producing a video. Okay, so then path 3, there's a whole nother set of directions, which I'm not going to get into, but it's all here. And what I want to do is show a video that came out of the idea of telling someone else's story. Renee, how am I doing for time? Sorry, you're muted, but I'll just go ahead and play this video.
Yeah, play that video and then we'll break up into small groups and have a conversation.
Oh, I want Chris to be able to say.
We're going to talk to Chris too.
Okay, sorry. So we'll watch this quickly and then we'll turn to Chris.
Hello, my name is Daniel Bradshaw. I'm a senior at Constitution High School in Philadelphia. Me, along with millions of other students across the country, have resorted to online learning as a result of the pandemic. Here specifically in Philadelphia, the public school district is facing controversy for suggesting that students who don't have adequate internet connection go sit in parking lots and use the Wi-Fi from local buildings in order to complete their learning. At first, I thought this was a joke, and then I found out that it wasn't. This is just one example of how the pandemic is exposing deep inequities in education and internet access. I got a hold of someone who's been dealing with problems like this for a very long time, Jessica Rosenworth from the Federal Communications Commission. There's long been a debate on whether or not internet access should be considered a public utility, similar to the way that water and electricity are regulated to make sure that people have affordable access to it. What do you think about that?
I mean, listen, if before this crisis you thought internet access was a luxury good, it was nice to have, everything about this crisis is making it need to have. I mean, you can't, for so many households, you can't do work, you can't go to school, you can't reach out for healthcare, you cannot maintain any semblance of modern life without it. It feels a lot to me like plumbing, electricity, and all these essential pieces of infrastructure that we count on making available to everyone. We gotta figure out how to have broadband for all. And if we don't, I think we're gonna hold this country back.
Actually, they're trying here in Philadelphia. The school district is working to distribute Wi-Fi hotspots to students in need. In addition to this, the superintendent recently walked back the recommendations for students who use parking lot Wi-Fi.
All right, so that video was actually edited by Marie Cusick, who's a youth media producer, who's actually in this webinar and who's going to help us with the breakout sessions. And I thought it was a really great example. She worked with one of her schools in Philadelphia about a story that she had seen, and this is something that I really am hoping, we're really hoping comes out of our curriculum as it's more broadly, spread, and as teachers are coming back to school and trying to find this kind of real world project-based experiences with meaning. Those are the kinds of pieces that we're hoping to see, and that's why we kind of put this together as an example. Okay, so does it make sense, Renee, if Chris is gonna present, should I keep my screen and put this up, or should I give it back to you?
That's up to you and Chris. Chris, take it away.
Chris, you're still muted.
Sorry about, I think we could go back to just cameras. I'd get tired of looking at my profile pic there. Yeah, so I'd piggyback off of what Leah was just talking about. You talk about purposeful storytelling. That example from Philadelphia is outstanding. And I think, that shows agency. Like, that person has the presence of mind, that teenager has the presence of mind to reach out to an expert. There's some technical stuff that has to take place there too, right? So like, do a Zoom interview, to contact someone, to have the presence of mind to do the interview, and then to actually ask the questions that that person asked, that young person asked. That was really impressive. And so I would go back a little bit to, March 16th, which is when we went to online. So I teach in Salt Lake City, Utah. Primarily, it's a middle class population that I teach. And when it hit like online school, the next Monday we were just going to start, and we had one day to prepare people. And I would say as a teacher, my cognitive load was pretty high there. it's not like I've taught online courses before, but I still was scrambling because we're all used to this face-to-face setting. And, you know, there was a lot on my mind. And so that resource that Leah just shared, the Making Sense of Coronavirus, I just used that as my curriculum since March 16th. So, you know, I would put that, I would say, well, here's your assignment, do step 1 of path 1. You know, next week, let's do step 2. You know, I toned it down a little bit. I didn't think the workload was too much. And we would meet once a week synchronously. And then the rest of the time, I would just talk to students about their projects. Having that resource, I thought, was awesome. Especially there's one resource that's in that packet. It's conducting virtual interviews, which is where things really started to take off with my students. Because when we broke, you know, all our normal ways of working, I'm thinking, I teach English, but also media production. The ways we did media production was always face-to-face. And, you know, we had the software there. I had the cameras there. You know, we would use that room to make media, and I wasn't sure how things would go. And I have been just blown away by what they've done. I'll drop something in the chat here right now. That's their media site. And one of the things that I think is amazing is you'll see there's a series that they started to do. They reached out to teens around the world, you know, Quarantines, it's called, they're on episode 4. And the first one was this girl who really didn't say much in class, in face-to-face class. And she said, oh, you know, Hannah, who was an international student at our school, left right away to go back to Korea. She said, oh, I think I could connect with her. And so she did. And I think having that resource, that Making Sense of Coronavirus, but then also within there is another resource that's called Conducting Virtual Interviews. So my students, surprisingly, I mean, I shouldn't say I was surprised, but they actually looked at that resource and took it to heart. Because sometimes as a teacher, I don't know about you, you all teach people who probably do everything you tell them to do, but they don't always do everything I ask them to do. And I said, well, you should check out this virtual interview thing. And they did. And so just that example of the one story where she talked to the girl from South Korea, I said, wow, visually, that's a really impressive look. And she said, oh, yeah, well, I talked to her the day before, and it was like, I don't know, 10-hour difference. I talked to her the day before, and I told her, well, you should set up your background a little bit differently. Oh, and, you know, the lighting, you might want it, you know, shed on you in a different way. And I think that knowledge came from the SRL resources. And what I think that I take away from all this is that allowed her to focus more on the story, having the resource there. And me as a teacher, coming back to this resource, I think just allowed me to focus more on storytelling than the many ways that things can go wrong when students use their own tech to try to pull something like this off. I mean, I was going round and around with kids about like, oh, I've got a Samsung this, and I've got an old iPhone, and how does it all work together? Amazingly, they just started to figure stuff out, which, again, I shouldn't say amazingly, but I was just blown away with the quality of work that they were able to put together and how much fun they had. Because usually, again, me, in my setting, usually in April of a given school year, things are starting to wind down, and the motivation isn't always there for my students, you know? And so usually we're kind of limping through the end of the year, like, please just do something. And so they just kept doing all kinds of interesting things. The one kid who was locked in his house pretty much did a podcast with his mom, you know, sports, my mom and me. And it's this really cute thing where they just talk about sports. And so he did his own podcast with his mom. Other kids reaching out to students in other schools, obviously students in our own school. A girl who reached out to the local health official about the air quality in our valley and how she was perceiving things are better. And all of that, I think, comes back to having a resource that takes some of the burden off of me and allows me to focus on those things that, like storytelling. as opposed to the tech. And so, you know, when I looked at it, I would constantly tell them, like, wow, you guys, this is really impressive stuff. And it was genuine. And I think when you give kids the tools, the sense of agency, and, you know, the purposeful kind of storytelling, and give youth a voice, we're all teachers, and I think we know this, that I wish the adults around me sometimes were as rational when they talk about political issues as my teenagers. You know, because they really are still open-minded, and I think, like, we have to give voice to those students, because I think they are capable of coming up with things that we adults don't seem to have a handle on. So that's probably good enough for my segment right now.
Nice. Okay, so Leah, do you have a focus question that you would like the participants to discuss as we move into breakout groups? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yes, indeed. We do have a focus question that I'll drop into the chat, which is basically, what elements of the project-based journalism do you like best and why, kind of out of what we've just described? And what are the challenges that you might foresee of implementing this kind of project-based learning in your context?
We'd like to hear short reports from every group. Who wants to go first? What were some big ideas that came out of your group? Yanti, what about your group?
We looked at, like, the different ways. There were Catherine, Amy, Elise, and I, and we were, like, you know, sharing different stories. It seems to be very powerful and helpful to have the curriculum used, and I was curious, you know, to hear from Elise about, like, more nationally, like, the whole, like, teacher, how it's been working, and it's been working very well. But I was also interested in the challenges. One story that stood up for me was the story that Elise was telling about the teacher that wanted their students to do the first assignment about themselves. And then, Elise, I don't know, maybe you say it, like, quickly better than me.
Yeah, sure. Just a story from an educator in Maine that we work with, who I did a webinar with about this unit, the same curriculum, and he was saying how he was having some trouble engaging his students with it. And one of the reasons is because, like, a student came back to him after trying to do that first assignment, and she was like, I tried really hard to do it, but every time I turned on my camera to record, I would just, like, break out and cry because it was just so hard to tell my story about what's been going on in this time. Which was really powerful to hear, and just kind of goes to show how communication is so important, and how these kinds of assignments can actually shed light on some of the deep things that young people are going through. And then I'll add that Amy said something what I thought was really powerful about what it's shown her teaching in this time, which is the ability to really explore with her students and try different things that maybe wouldn't have been possible have we still be in the same classroom environment in person.
Wow, thanks so much for sharing.
And just one more thing that we're talking also, that it's beyond just the journalism practice. There is the digital authorship that has all the literacy skills that you're learning doing that as we know in normal times, but even in those times, learning the rhetoric, the articulation, the communication process, the digital etiquette, like, all those things together are a huge learning experience with all the challenges.
Yeah, great point. Chris, Isabel, Lisa, and Marie, you guys had a conversation in your breakout room. What were some big ideas that came up?
Well, I'll just jump in there. We had a new teacher, and Isabel is a middle school teacher. She's represented by Planet Earth there. Here, she's coming back. And so we kind of went into the resources available because as a classroom teacher, you also want some stuff to just plug in. And so I was reminded about, there were some really wise conversations there. So yeah, we talked about that path 1 too. And I gave them different media outlets to kind of talk about what Elise said. So the kids who were camera shy and were a little upset could just, it was okay to just type it out, just send it to me and let's talk. Because, there was a couple dark ones. And so don't turn the camera on yourself. But then we also mentioned that don't forget, it's not just about telling the story, it's about the media literacy that goes with it. And so then we were reminded not only of the resources from SRL, but also Renee's resources too, with all the media literacy that goes with it. And what an exciting time coming up to be back in school in the fall when there's an election coming up. So look for the resources that are available with the elections, which is going to be awesome. And then also there are resources around misinformation, which seems like that may be appropriate around election time as well. So yeah, a lot of focus on resources like that, and then also things like the Facebook group and those other human kinds of networks that we don't want to forget about when we're thinking about all these things.
I'd also add that I said this in the very last minute of our conversation, I'm from the local PBS NPR station in Philadelphia, and don't forget about your local station too, because your local station is a connector for you for SRL. And honestly, what's happening right now, they want to hear your voices of your students. Across the country, PBS stations have been putting content on TV to help teachers. So don't forget about those resources. I know that SRL stuff's on PBS Learning Media, but they want to have this content out there, and I'm sure the newsrooms, some of the areas that you're in is really small, or it might be a really big city, and they want to engage with you in some way because they're not able to go in the community the same way that they used to. So it's probably a great time to start a relationship if you don't have one yet. So just remember that.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. Christine and Wendy, tell us about some big ideas that came up in your group.
I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I teach in a high school that's 65% economically disadvantaged. And I just gave the example of, I teach 5 different preps, so curriculum was different for each of those classes, but my newspaper team had been trying for 2 years to try to get an online paper going at the same time they were doing the expected print edition. And with only 12 students, we were never successful really get up and running, and distance learning required us to do that. And we went through 3 iterations. We tried WordPress first and it wasn't working for my students. We tried S'more and that was too much scrolling for people when they're receiving it on their phones or iPads. And so we finally ended up on Google Sites for our 3rd edition during distance learning. And it was a really good collaborative project for my students and gave them focus and purpose. And while 100% of the newspaper staff did not participate, it was a really good learning experience for them. And when Renee pointed out that they were watching me learn along the way too, because I was the one looking for the right platform for us that was free because we have no money. And so we had to have a free platform. So it was a really good learning experience. And I was telling our group that the sign for me that it was successful is now faculty members are asking to put content in our newspaper. And before it was beat coverage and asking for information. And so we're looking forward to continuing this if we're back on campus or not in the fall. So that was a successful project. Not all of our efforts or my efforts were successful in the last 12 weeks, but that one was.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Amy, Leah, and Marcus, can you tell us some ideas that emerged in your discussion group? And then Leah, will ask you to close it. You and Yanti will close it out.
Amy, do you want to jump in? Or Marcus, you want to do?
Yeah, sure.
I think you're better at it. Let Marcus take over.
We had a great discussion with Amy and Evangeline too, who's joining us from the Philippines, which is really great because it sort of exemplified how a lot of, hopefully the principles that you all sort of saw today could be applied on an international level. And SRL, I just learned today, was actually in the Philippines too. I'm sort of a new member of the team. but we've also been to Jordan and other places across the country. But it's really that idea, this universal application of how do you get student voices out there in the world? And so one of the challenges we worked through in our small group was really to think about student motivation and how do you create the right conditions to really push students to see the stories around them, really be involved in those stories and follow through. So I know, Chris, you talked a little bit about the beginning, not all your students ask or do what they're told. And so how do you, again, create that enthusiasm, motivation through not only just this curriculum, but the amazing people that are on this call today? You know, how do you continue to push through them?
Thanks, Marcus. And just, closing up, I mean, I really feel like, and it was actually brought up in our session, in our little group, that education is, and the reopening of schools and what's happening with students in our country in the next couple of months and in the next year is like one of the biggest stories I've ever seen from what we're seeing and hearing. And so who better than teenagers, than students who are being affected to be able to look into these issues, report on them, tell their stories, use their voices, and have an impact on the decisions that are going to be made that directly impact their near future and then their long-term future and the way that they are going to come out of this pandemic in the end.
So thank you, everybody. We're like coming to a close. This is just the beginning of a discussion because, as we know, everybody was jumped into it like in the last 3 months. But our practices are going to change tremendously, especially like in the fall. And this is a beginning of new practices based upon what we've been doing before and coming to learn. So we'll have more of those kind of engagement and seeing like, what can we do as a community to really support each other and continue doing the good fight. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon and wishing you all to be healthy, safe, and be in touch. Please look at the Media Education Lab website and the Student Reporting Lab website for any resources. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.